Hello, and welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we aren't members of the Academy, but that won't stop us from telling them all the ways they got it wrong.
Idiots.
I am joined I'm joined as always by the Sergio Leone of podcasts, Hugo Pinay.
Oh, wow. Wow. What an honor, I guess. Hello.
And the Walt Disney of predicting Oscar winners, Josh Bradley.
But way less racist. Hello. Hi.
How are you guys doing today?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
Good.
I'm having a good morning so far. Looking forward to talking some Oscars, which is what we're doing here today.
Yeah.
The 93rd...
One of my favorite topics.
Oh, without a doubt, one of Josh's favorite topics. The 93rd Oscars are coming up here fast, so we thought now would be a good time to look back 10 Oscars ago and figure out how we would have done it differently. So that's right, we're redoing the 2011 Oscars. We're going to start with some information about some of the most important movies of that year, and then we're going to each talk about a below-the-line category, as Josh refers to them. I don't know if that's an official term.
Well, you called it lesser categories in the outline. And I'm
Yes.
like, dude, put some respect in the cinematographers, you know.
Yeah, well, so I was going to put lesser in quotes to imply that I don't actually believe they are lesser, but that is
And then
how
you made
the
the conscious
world
choice to
perceives
not put those quotes in the outline, so I don't know what you're talking about
Up
now.
at the top, it's in quotes. You can see it. It says
Okay,
lesser in
fine.
quotes. Anyways, we're going to talk about a below-the-line category that we feel got it wrong or had a snub in it, and then we're going to dive into 8 specific categories that we all feel comfortable pretending to be knowledgeable about enough to rehash the results.
Yes.
So those 8 categories are Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Actor, Best Actress, Directing, and of course, Best Picture. And then after that, we will do our film to remember, which was for this week, 127 Hours. So you guys ready to dive in?
Super ready.
Yes.
Okay, so first, just some boilerplate stuff about the 2011 Oscars, the 83rd Academy Awards. Took place February 27th, 2011, hosted by James Franco and Anne Hathaway.
Did you guys watch?
I did, yes, of course.
Hugo, did you watch? You were like 14.
I did not. I was 14, and they air at 3 a.m. at night, so I did not.
Well, so
So you
probably
weren't
still would have been
dedicated enough.
running when you woke up for school that day.
Yeah,
because
possibly.
It ran for 3 hours and 16 minutes, which is what I'm worried
Honestly-
this podcast is going to do.
I feel like that's not that long as far as the Oscars go.
It's not one of the records.
No.
It's a pretty good amount of time, but definitely not the record. In order to be eligible to be nominated under normal circumstances, because we're comparing it to this year, a movie must have been publicly exhibited for paid admission for at least 1 week in an LA County commercial theater. The exceptions to those rules are the shorts, documentaries, foreign films, and the music awards, which all have their own qualifications for nomination.
But they do also play in theaters in LA as like the shorts packages post-nomination usually. Yeah.
And I love watching those shorts bundles. One of my highlights of every year is going to watch all the shorts. Not this year.
They're playing some places.
Yeah, I just don't. I doubt that the local theater is going to put it together because they don't have great attendance to
That's
begin
true.
with.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, they probably have to rebuild their business right now, so they'll start with the blockbusters and stuff
Putting
like that.
Godzilla
Absolutely.
and Kong on every screen.
On every screen.
Yeah. Probably.
The 10 nominees for Best Picture in 2011, and therefore the movies that received the most nominations overall, were 127 Hours, which received 6 total nominations, Black Swan, which received 5 nominations and 1 win, The Fighter, 7 nominations, 2 wins, Inception, 8 nominations, 4 wins, The Kids Are All Right, 4 nominations, The King's Speech with 12 nominations and 4 wins, The Social Network, 8 nominations, 3 wins, Toy Story 3, 5 nominations, 2 wins, True Grit had 10 nominations and won nothing, and then Winter's Bone had 4 nominations. So, Josh, what can you tell me about the Oscars, and like, how hard is it for a movie that's not a Best Picture to even get nominated in the other categories with all the stuff that these movies get nominated for?
Well, so back up a little bit. So in 2009, so the year before this, they made the Best Picture. They expanded the Best Picture category from 5 nominees to 10 nominees. largely the theory goes because The Dark Knight didn't get nominated for Best Picture. And then this year is the second year they did that, where you have 10 nominees here. And the year after this, they changed the Best Picture category again, where it's between 5 and 10 nominees. And we've not had 10 nominees since. And I think they're actually about to change it again, where we'll actually have 10 full nominees moving forward from now. But like, this was like the last year, excuse me, this was the last year where they did 10 full nominees, which is why you see 10 here.
Which I think is a good choice, by the way.
You think it's a good choice to have 10 total?
I do. Yeah,
I do too.
I think with the amount of great movies that come out nowadays, it's narrowing it down to just, even 8. I just don't see how having 2 more nominees hurts the exclusivity of the club.
Yeah. I mean, there are different, before the Oscar nominations come out, there are different like award bodies that give out like a Best Picture-esque kind of thing, and they usually have 10 nominees total, and they're mandated to have 10. I'm thinking of the National Board of Review lists say 10 best of the year at the end of the year, and the Producer Guild Awards have 10 nominees for their theatrical feature. And normally before the Oscar nominations come out, people are poring over the 10 from the National Board of Review list and the 10 from the PGA list and trying to figure out which 8 movies of those, collection of 11 or 12 total with overlap will get the Best Picture nom. And I agree with you guys. Let's just do 10. But to your point, Grizz, because there are so many Best Picture nominees, a movie that gets nominations elsewhere is likely to, they're more likely than they have ever been to get a Best Picture nom. I know that there is a record for something that the most nominations without actually getting a Best Picture nom, I think, is like 8, but it was many, many, many years ago before we had the expansion to 10 nominees. So now I think if anything gets, I guess Ma Rainey's Black Bottom this year has like 4 or 5 nominations and it doesn't have a Best Picture nom, but like that's an anomaly nowadays.
Yeah.
If something has more than like 3 noms, it's getting a Best Picture nom too.
And I mean, that makes sense. Obviously, if you're getting nominated in the other categories, then there's a good chance that you deserve a Best Picture nominee. But
also, like, the opposite happens too, especially in these 2 weird years when they expanded Best Picture and like kind of clearly weren't really sure how to handle that yet. So like, you'll have something like, I remember the first year they expanded to 10, A Serious Man, the Coen Brothers movie, was nominated for Best Picture, and it was nominated for Best Picture and Original Screenplay only, and that's crazy.
That's weird.
Yeah, and I think The Blind Side may have also
fantastic.
Oh, I love A Serious Man. Don't get me started on that. But I think The Blind Side was in a similar situation. A movie I love quite a bit less than I love A Serious Man, but I think that was like Best Actress and Best Picture only, and like those are anomalies where you only have like 2 nominations total and one gets Best Picture, and then you get these the opposite problem basically.
What makes predicting the Oscars so difficult is because you really can't understand the logic of some things sometimes.
Well, just the rules are changing, so it's hard
All
to
the time.
it's hard to go by like historical precedents when the rules are always changing on you.
So some fun facts about some of the nominees. I just wanted to throw in there that Toy Story 3 was only the 3rd animated movie nominated for Best Picture.
Can you name the other 2?
Beauty and the Beast is one of them,
Yes.
and
Up.
Was Up
Yes.
the other one? Yeah, there you go.
So Beauty and the Beast, you could argue, is like the only quote-unquote real animated Best Picture nominee, because it was the only one that snuck in when there's only 5 nominees. And Up and Toy Story 3 both snuck in here in the first 2 years of the expansion. We were still trying to figure out how the hell to do this,
And it's, to me, that's a sore spot because I know. And this is one of the reasons I do think having 10 nominees is good, because the best animated film of the year, I mean, has, in my mind, should have a pretty good shot of being one of the best pictures of the year. So I look forward to seeing more animated movies in Best Picture nominees at some point down the line. True Grit was the second film to lose in all 10 categories it was nominated for. Do you guys remember the other one?
Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York.
And then it's happened again since.
Yeah.
It happened.
Oh, that's true.
3 years after this. With do you guys know what happened? What movie did it after this?
2 years after, you said?
2013. 3 years after.
3 years
Directed by a
after.
guy who's also in this year's race.
Give it to me, Josh.
David O. Russell's follow-up, American Hustle, also went over 10.
Oh, yeah.
Went
I
over.
remember that movie.
Yeah.
Which I think between True Grit, Gangs of New York, and American Hustle, I think True Grit is probably my favorite. So
By far for me.
I adore Gangs of New York.
I like Gangs of New York a lot too. Daniel Day-Lewis is just unhinged in that movie.
He's perfect.
I have more qualms with Gangs of New York than I do with True Grit. American Hustle is one of the most forgettable Best Picture
I
nominees.
agree.
10 nominations.
American Hustle was fine.
Unbelievably forgettable movie.
Okay, well, so another fun fact: James Franco was the 5th person to host the Oscars in a year in which they were also nominated.
Wow.
Yeah,
That was weird when they did that.
Yeah.
Because they did like they cut to everyone in their seat for best actor during the introduction, and like it just cuts to him like in the wings, like, on
standing
the side of
there,
the stage, and it was weird. I didn't really like it.
Imagine if he won. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, that would have been great if he had won, and he just runs out onto the stage like, "I'm already here."
Yeah.
But you got to imagine that the contract for hosting was decided well before the nominations were announced, right?
Yes. Yeah. However, like 127 Hours came out at the fall film festivals, and like he was immediately lauded as a Best Actor potential candidate, at least. So it's not like this came out of nowhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the timeline was.
But still, only the 5th in the history of the Oscars, which, I don't know. Like, at the same time, I feel like that's actually kind of a lot, but then
I agree. I'm shocked this happened 4 other times.
Yeah, the ones before it were Paul Hogan and Michael Caine were the two immediately preceding ones. Okay,
I mean, you just blew my mind twice. Number 1, that Paul Hogan has an Oscar nomination, and number 2, that Michael Caine's hosted the Oscars.
Yeah, well,
Holy crap?
Don't hold me to it. That's okay. What the Wikipedia article on the Oscars told me.
All right.
Cool though. I'd watch Michael Caine host the Oscars now. That would be fun.
I'd watch Paul Hogan in an Oscar-nominated performance. I mean, maybe I wouldn't, to be honest. But
boy, now I'm really worried that maybe I just misread the name and it wasn't Michael Caine.
No, it's okay. Hey, we don't fact check here. We're a podcast.
I sure hope someone will fact check for me.
Let our listeners fact check.
Google that. The Kids Are All Right and Winter's Bone were only the 9th and 10th films directed by women that were nominated for Best Picture, and neither director was nominated for Best Director that year.
I'm so shocked.
Yeah, we continue to be shocked by this.
Yeah, extremely shocking, isn't it?
So,
as you can tell by the tone of our voices.
So I guess we can move on into our below-the-line categories.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and start. I'll start with Josh.
Start with me. Okay. I want to talk about Best Cinematography. So the nominees for Best Cinematography for the 2010 movies were Matthew Libatique's photography of Black Swan, Danny Cohen for The King's Speech, Jeff Cronenweth for The Social Network, our guy Roger Deakins for True Grit, and the winner was Wally Pfister for Inception. I want to say that I enjoy Wally Pfister's photography a lot. This was his 4th Oscar nomination. He was nominated for 4 straight Nolan movies: Batman Begins, The Prestige, Dark Knight, and Inception. And I think purely from a cinematography perspective, of those 4, Inception's my least favorite, possibly. I think Inception is a great movie, but I think of it more as a feat of screenwriting and of production design and visual effects and editing and sound. Yeah. More than I think of it as a feat of cinematography. And like when I think of like the images that immediately come to mind from Inception, the 2 that immediately come to mind are the rotating hallway and Paris folding over on itself, which are both completely iconic images. But again, those are more, to me, feats of production design and visual effects more than they're feats of cinematography. And so looking at these 5 nominees, 5 really great nominees here, even though I enjoy Wally Pfister's cinematography here, he's probably 5th of 5 for me out of these nominees, personally.
Well, so I have a question for you, Josh.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the Best Cinematography award supposed to be looking at?
That's a great question, and I think people have different ways of viewing it. We were kind of talking off mic about editing, and like, are we going to talk about editing for either of you guys? Or can I vamp a little bit? Personally, I think, if I can stand in my soapbox, I think that the editing Oscar and the cinematography Oscar should kind of go hand in hand more often than they do. They kind of never do, but like those work in conjunction with each other. But I bring up editing because no one really knows what editing looks like or what good editing is. So people have very, very definitions when they vote for best editing.
Because I kind of think with editing, like, if the editing is really well done, you might not even notice that things were edited.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. A good editor is potentially invisible, yeah. But so I bring up the fact that most people don't know what good editing looks like to also connect it to cinematography, and that people don't necessarily know what they're voting on with cinematography either. Like, sometimes they vote for the most in-your-face cinematography, like, long shots and that kind of stuff. Emmanuel Lubezki won 3 straight Oscars in the 2010s for his long takes with Alfonso Cuarón and Alejandro Iñárritu. Excuse me, while I just stumbled on that name. But it's also it's lighting, it's composition, it's movement of the camera. It's to me, I look for like what kind of storytelling can you get out just with your images and that kind of thing. And so that's why in all of those aspects, Roger Deakins is one of the best to ever do it, and he's nominated here, and he famously didn't win until his 14th nomination. So I mean, I just wanted to say that if I was going to give out the nominations, I would probably either drop Wally Pfister or Danny Cohen for The King's Speech, and I would find a place to reward Robbie Richardson for Shutter Island. Robbie Richardson, he's already won like 3 Oscars and like 9 nominations. He's a longtime collaborator of Scorsese and Oliver Stone and Tarantino, but he's one of the best. And I don't know, did you guys watch Shutter Island this week?
No,
not this week, but I've seen it several times.
It's some stunning imagery, and I mean, yes. I'm also just kind of a sucker for Robbie Richardson's lighting. He does like the overhead white light kind of thing, but I would like to see him in here. But if I'm giving this Oscar out, I'm tempted to give it to Deakins because I think that the cinematography in True Grit is great. I love how much they use pretty much entirely natural lighting because it's 1860s or whatever, 1870s, and I love the landscapes. I love like they're lit by fires for the interiors and that kind of stuff. I think it's really great. But I have the 10 years benefit of hindsight, where I know that Roger Deakins is going to win for Blade Runner in 7 years and then win again for 1917 in 9 years. And Hugo, you've mentioned before how disappointing it is when someone who's like long overdue for an Oscar wins an Oscar for like a lesser, effort.
This would have been a lesser effort for Roger Deakins.
It's not that it is among the top 5, if not top 2 best pieces of cinematography of the year for me, but it's also like maybe cracks the top 10 for Deakins' work, which is just like tells you what kind of that this guy's a madman, and that this is maybe his 10th or 8th best.
And the fact that he's also worked in westerns specifically and done something that is more visually striking.
That's a really good point, because 3 years before this, he shot both No Country for Old Men and The Assassination of Jesse James by the crowd Robert Ford, which is both are westerns, and The Assassination of Jesse James is maybe the best cinematography of any movie I've ever seen. So that's a really good point, Hugo.
It's up there.
I'm probably thinking I'm giving this to Jeff Cronenweth for The Social Network, if only because he's a longtime collaborator with Fincher. I've always loved how Fincher's movies look, particularly the ones that Cronenweth has shot, and he's never won an Oscar. And I think The Social Network, there's a lot of imagery in The Social Network that stayed with me. And granted, I've watched that movie a dozen times, but it just Wally Pfister's Inception win just never really sat right with me. I'm glad Wally Pfister has an Oscar, but I don't know. Nolan's kind of moved on from Pfister. Now he works with
Hoyt van Hoytema.
Yeah, Hoyt van Hoytema. This win just wasn't right for me. I'm glad it seemed kind of like a makeup Oscar for not giving it to him for The Dark Knight, I think.
Or even, I think in terms of cinematography, did he get nominated for The Prestige?
Yeah, he did, which I think was great. Like I said, like of the 4 nominations he has, Batman Begins, Prestige, Dark Knight, and this is my least favorite from a cinematography perspective. And I think that they were
I can see why it's hard to say that, because it is tough to separate all the incredible visuals you get in Inception from the cinematography. But you're right, most of those visuals are special effects.
I'm probably being unfair to what the definition of cinematography is, because it is like what you're seeing on screen, basically. That is cinematography in the most literal sense. So like, again, I'm probably being unfair and like kind of splitting hairs by saying that it's a feat of editing and visual effects, but I don't know. I could give the argument for Wally Pfister deserving it. I think for me personally, just based on the way that the all of JGL's stuff was shot in the hallways, because
like, that action sequence when they're tumbling around a hotel
Amazing.
is incredible. And so it had to be quite challenging to shoot in a way that wouldn't make people sick.
Well, again, that I think of that as production design and visual effects, because you know how they shot that?
Enlighten me.
They had a
They actually built a rig that rotates.
They had a hallway that rotated on a gimbal, so they had basically several feet of hallway that could rotate, and they just set the camera stationary in the hallway, so the camera moves as the hallway rotates, and the people in it just kind of move as the camera rotates. So it looks like they're climbing on the walls and the ceiling, and they're actually just having normal gravity, but the room's moving around them, and the camera's just fixed such that it moved, in sync with the hallway itself.
Yeah.
So actually that's pretty simple.
Pretty simple to shoot, but the production design was...
Exactly. The visual effects team and the production design is crazy there. But, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So it's tough for people to separate, especially if they didn't do their research like you did. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about cinematography, Josh?
Jeff Cronenweth's shooting The Social Network is great. And I love every shot in that movie. So too bad he didn't win, because he hasn't won since. So
Hugo, do you want to go next?
Yeah, cinematography was also one that I was going to mention and say similar things, because I think, again, I don't think Wally Pfister is undeserving, but I do agree that there are a few films, specifically Shutter Island and True Grit, for me, that kind of stuck out a bit
and Black
more
Swan.
in terms of just... Black Swan as well. Black
Swan too. I watched
great cinematography.
I watched most of that this week, and I forgot how good Matthew Libatique's cinematography in that is. It's really good.
Yeah, the choice of shooting in 16mm for that movie specifically, that gives sort of a grainy look, and from a distance it's relatively low resolution, but it works because from a distance there are a few scenes where you're supposed to see something, but you're not very sure what you're seeing. So I think it's a great choice.
I was watching that this week, and my wife walked in the room, and she said, "Why does this look so old?" And it's because it's shot on 16mm.
It's very intentional. Yeah. Another great example. But so pivoting from that, I guess something that stuck out for me was actually a film that I don't think is a great movie, but I think should have been nominated for visual effects and art direction, and it's Tron Legacy. Not a fantastic film, but I think this is something that I sometimes have a bit of an issue with the way these awards are given out, is that sometimes films that aren't, excellent dramas or, just fantastic even in their own genre, but do some specific things very well, still get ignored because they don't have the overall
other
reception.
things, yeah.
So I think in terms of visual effects and in terms of art direction, that Tron Legacy is one of the best looking films of the year, one of the most interesting looking films of the year, and it has some great special effects. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie.
I haven't seen it, but obviously I just knowing from what it looked like in the trailer, that this movie had some pretty impressive visual effects.
That trailer was pretty stunning.
And the story is a little all over the place. It's not a great film overall, but it's kind of a sticking point for me that I think films that do specific things, since we have the categories, films that do specific things very well should be rewarded regardless of if, in general, they're particularly great movies or not.
The other thing,
for example, I would kind of think that in terms of visual effects, I could put this above, for example, Iron Man 2 or Hereafter, or, not necessarily movies that I would put in front of it. And when you go to art direction becomes, Alice in Wonderland won, but I guess, which seems to me like an award for most art direction, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Which, the art direction, for example, in True Grit or even in The King's Speech or Inception, it seems would have been more deserving. Or Shutter Island, art direction in Shutter Island is fantastic. But even in Black Swan, as we said. But in terms of art direction, I feel like Harry Potter has probably got its due in all the films before it, and this one is just doing more of that, but I don't think it's particularly the one that sticks out. It's the seventh movie in an 8-movie series.
Josh, did you have something you wanted to add about art direction or visual effects?
I wanted to add something. I wanted to add something about Hugo saying that he wishes that movies that weren't like serious dramas could get their due in the categories, because that's the purpose of the categories. I just want to caution that's also how Suicide Squad has an Oscar for Best Makeup, is for that exact point right there. So careful what you wish for with your monkey's paw.
Oscar-winning movie Suicide Squad. But the makeup was great.
The makeup was good.
To be fair.
Was it
so?
I mean, it was like it wasn't. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but I thought the characters looked cool.
Yeah.
Well, most of them.
But I do see your point. I do see your point. But at the same time,
I see yours too. Yeah.
So what I wanted to add was, because you were talking about Tron Legacy, one thing, I haven't seen the movie, but I have heard the score. And that was one thing I wanted to mention, was that movie, again, not a great movie, but you're going to tell me that score shouldn't have been in consideration for original score? That
Daft Punk, right?
It was Daft Punk did the music. It was fantastic.
Yeah. It was great.
And so, it's like you said, these movies that aren't considered great movies, they can't even get into the categories they might deserve to get into, which is why I was going to talk about my below the line category was also visual effects, and I wanted to bring up that Scott Pilgrim versus the World should have been nominated, and I personally would have said they should win. Like I think the visual effects in Scott Pilgrim versus the World are incredible. They brought a comic book to life, but not just a comic book. They also brought to life the video game elements that are essential to the story of the comic, and they bring it all in a way that blends well with the real life setting. I just think it's brilliantly done. It adds an aesthetic to the movie that is perfect. I was a huge fan of the comics, so the way that whole movie was brought to life is near flawless to me.
I agree. I like the conceit of the visuals that you're talking about, the kind of the melding of the mediums, basically.
Yeah.
But there's no way that deserves the visual effects Oscar over Inception. I'm sorry. I love the movie too. I think I might actually like that movie more than Inception, possibly, but the visuals in Inception are unreal. So I mean, I think they may have gotten it right here.
Yeah, the thing with Inception is that it's not just CGI. It's the way that movie blends practical and VFX is absolutely incredible.
Right.
And
so and this
what they're able to achieve is
we were talking last night a little bit, Josh, about what are these categories actually about, and I maybe this is why it didn't get nominated, was because there's no category for just like aesthetic in general, which I think that in all the movies I saw from this year, I do think Scott Pilgrim versus the World builds the best world.
I like that take. Yeah, sure.
And there's just nowhere to award all of that fairly.
Yeah. Is that why you were asking me about art direction last night?
That's why I was asking about art direction,
Okay.
because like the sets themselves in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World are not really that special. It's the visual effects.
I enjoy them though.
I like them. They're good. It's that cool Canadian grunge thing they got going on, which is
but it's
cool.
not what stands out.
But it's not. Yeah, it's the visual effects that stand out the most. So I was like it doesn't really fit in art direction. But you're right. The visual effects in Inception, because of the addition of the practical effects, is what makes. I'll tell you, this is my complaint with Inception's visual effects, and I have one moment that stands out to me as bad visual effects that makes me think the whole thing doesn't deserve it, and that's when they the city has folded over and they're going to walk up the vertical street.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It looks bad. It looks bad when they take that step and they have this weird, like, herky-jerky,
well,
like a
gravity has
PowerPoint
to reset,
transition.
Grizz. Give him a second for the gravity to reset.
Okay,
Yeah.
but this is my point. Like, that one thing, because they stopped and they focus on it.
No, I know.
And so if you're gonna stop and make a big point to show me them going up this vertical wall, it needs to look better. And so, yeah, the rest of the movie has fantastic visual effects, but
You're right. Take away the Oscar. Take away the Oscar because the step was weird for a second and Grizz didn't like it.
I'm just saying it sticks out to me. It sticks out to me as a very bad moment in an otherwise excellent visual movie, whereas in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, I don't have a bad moment that sticks out to me. So, yeah.
Well, actually, when Matthew Patel kind of explode into coins. The coins kind of scattered kind of in a weird way, and I didn't like that for a second. So no, that shouldn't win it either.
Okay,
I get what you're saying. I'm being a jerk. I get it. I just want to mention, as long as we're talking about the visual effects Oscar and like how Inception is probably the most visual effects. Scott Pilgrim would be a different interpretation of what the visual effects would be rewarding. And I'm thinking of the 2015 Oscars, or for the 2015 movies, when it was like The Revenant against Star Wars The Force Awakens, against a third thing that was like equally likely to win. And do you guys remember what won?
No.
Ex Machina. Ex Machina.
Okay, but the visual effects in that are fantastic.
Which basically what they're rewarding there is that movie had $0 to spend, and somehow they like used their money to the fullest extent and had some really, really clever and very stunning visuals in it, even though they had no budget to work with. So they were kind of rewarding, ingenuity there, and like that could have been a case for Scott Pilgrim potentially. I think Scott Pilgrim was, I'm certain, much lower budget than Inception, and a different a different kind of visual effect that they were going for throughout that movie would have been closer to something like Ex Machina, which is a Oscar winner.
So you're telling me
effects.
There's a chance.
I'm telling you, there's a chance.
Okay, well, so that was my category. We ready to move on into our next?
Yes,
our main categories. So we're starting with Best Adapted Screenplay. So the first thing I wanted to ask is, what are they supposed to be voting on when they're voting on Best Adapted Screenplay?
Good question. I think did you like the movie is a good place to start.
Yes.
Like I'm not sure anyone, like, I'm sure some people are actually reading screenplays. I know like the Writers Guild Awards nominees like send out the actual physical screenplays or like a PDF of the screenplays. So like theoretically some people are actually reading the words on the page, but I doubt most people voting on this are.
Right.
So you can watch a movie and say, oh, that was well written. What does that mean? I don't know. It means different things to different people. So like,
I think usually it means that you liked the literal words that you heard.
Potentially, but also like I try to look at like how things are structured. Like, Inception, for example, or really any Christopher Nolan movie is a structured in a good way. Sorkin movies are structured in unique ways usually too. So,
but the thing that I think is missing for the people who don't actually read the screenplays is that how often the screenplays have the directions on where the camera should be and how to light this scene, and not every screenplay has that.
That's extremely rare nowadays. That's something from like the 40s where they would call out specific shots. Sometimes they'll call out like a tracking shot in modern screenplays, but that's kind of it.
So, but they still have the occasional thing like that. Like you said, they say
they have.
It's more like a suggestion than like do this.
What you'll see, you won't see camera directions in modern screenplays, but you will see like internalized character stuff potentially.
Right.
Like you may have a better sense of like what was on the page and what the actor brought to it, by reading the screenplay. But I will say though, if people like really read screenplays, I would think that Greta Gerwig would now have 2 Oscars. Because I do read screenplays, and her writing is so freaking good. She's so good on the page. Like, both Lady Bird and Little Women are just absolute joys to read. And they're also very joyful movies to watch, but she's really talented, and she's great.
Well, and so, on the topic of a movie like Little Women, we're looking at adapted screenplays. So what is an adapted screenplay? Well, it's a lot of things, as it turns out. The most basic terms, it's something that was based on another intellectual property in one way or another.
Of some kind.
And sometimes in the very loosest way possible. So real quick, I'll give the nominations for Best Adapted Screenplay. Oops, gotta get to the right tab. There we go. The nominations were The Social Network, which won, 127 Hours, Toy Story 3, True Grit, and Winter's Bone. So all of these were Best Picture nominees. So you have an idea of their caliber.
But you asked what is an adapted screenplay. 3 of these I think are what people would consider traditional adapted screenplays, in that they are adapted from either a novel or a memoir, and those are 127 Hours, True Grit, and Winter's Bone. 2 of them are a little bit more unique in terms of quote unquote adapted screenplays.
Yeah, I think this is nonsense.
On that for a second?
Yes, please.
I would say one especially.
Yes. Well, Toy Story 3 is an adapted screenplay because it's based on characters that appeared in Toy Story and Toy Story 2. even though both of those were original stories, and Toy Story 3 is an original story, it's based on existing characters. So by this definition, I think every sequel is technically an adapted screenplay. I remember in 2013, Richard Linklater, Before Midnight, was nominated in the adapted screenplay category because it's the third movie in the Before trilogy, which is nonsense to me. I agree.
So I have this is a hypothetical situation that obviously did not happen. But let's say a movie like Ready Player One got nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. Is it adapted because they had all these cameos of characters from other books?
That's based on a book. That's based on
that's true. That one would be based on a book. So that one could actually be justified. Bad example. But you get my point.
Space Jam 2 trailer just dropped, and there's all these kinds of characters in it. I don't really know.
It's a sequel, too.
But that's a sequel. Space Jam. Going back all the way to Space Jam.
I mean, the fact that Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig are in Space Jam, does that make an adapted screenplay? I don't really know.
I don't know.
I guess so.
That seems like nonsense to me. But then the real weird one to me is the one that Josh wants to talk about now.
The Social Network is adapted from the book The Accidental Billionaires by Ben Mesrick. However, when Aaron Sorkin began writing the Social Network screenplay, Ben Mesrick did not have a book yet. He had a book proposal. It was 14 pages long, and the publisher had bought his book proposal, so he was in the process of writing The Accidental Billionaires, but Aaron Sorkin did not have a book to work from. He had a 14-page book proposal. So effectively, Aaron Sorkin was writing, the Mark Zuckerberg movie while Ben Mesrick was writing the Mark Zuckerberg book in parallel tracks, basically. But he still, I'm sure he leaned on Mesrick for research or whatever, but he still basically was writing an original screenplay for all intents and purposes and was not working from source material. So that's a weird one. But
yeah, I think that's really weird. It doesn't, if the book hasn't been published yet, I don't know how you could say it's been adapted from that book.
I wonder if one of the reasons is just a property rights thing. Because of the fact that the studio had bought the rights for the book that was supposed to come out.
Obvious.
That could be one of the reasons. But in terms of screenwriting, in the sense of what is the craft of screenwriting, that's an original screenplay.
Yeah, I don't want to be too reductive in what an adapted screenplay is, but I remember when the Coen brothers won adapted screenplay for No Country for Old Men, they were at one point asked about their writing process, and they said, well, it's a good thing there's two of us because one of us can hold the book open and the other one of us can type. And again, I think that's a very, very reductive and jokey thing about what an adapted screenplay is when you literally just have a book open and you're transcribing it. But that's also, Aaron Sorkin did not have the luxury of having someone hold the book open for him because the book didn't exist yet.
Okay, well, so here's the crux of our question on this is, did they get it right? If yes, why? If not, then who? And were there any snubs? So, did they get this one right?
Yes.
They did.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have a runner-up in mind? That if it couldn't have been Social Network because it wasn't actually an adapted screenplay? Do you have a do you have a different one in mind?
I think the Coen brothers writing in True Grit is fantastic.
I really enjoy True Grit. Yeah.
But The Social Network is, considered one of the best movies of all time, one of the best movies of the decade, because of how praiseworthy the writing is and the direction is, and I just think it's Sorkin's best work for me.
I mean, we'll talk about 127 Hours later, but I do think that I think it's a feat of screenwriting to take the story that existed, the real life story, and put that into a feature film format, and I think they really structured it well and did a good job adapting
that. That would have been my runner-up as well.
Cool.
It would have been 127 hours. But yeah,
I still think that film succeeds more because of its direction and how they are able to keep the tension and stuff.
We'll talk about 127 Hours later, but yeah.
But yeah, so Social Network definitely should have won. So not too mad about that. Did you have any snubs?
The Town. I would love to see The Town in here.
Okay.
Yeah,
I enjoyed The Town, so it would be cool.
I think it was not. So the Writers Guild Awards, which are a precursor to the Oscars, they usually match up fairly closely, but usually 4 out of the 5 nominees will appear in the Oscars. And The Town was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the WGA Awards, but was not nominated at the Oscars. So that was probably close to getting a nomination. And yeah, I would have liked to see that here.
And was it in Toy Story 3's spot?
Let me check.
Maybe.
I think so. Well, I mean, it looks like the adapted screenplay is only 3 out of 5. It had 107 Hours, Social Network, True Grit, but then also The Town, and I Love You, Philip Morris was nominated for adapted screenplay at the WGAs.
I didn't see that movie, but that seems odd to me.
Nor did I. So, yeah, I guess that took.
I had 2 snubs. I'll put it in quotes because, like, I understand that it's not necessarily an Oscar type of thing, but if you're gonna give Toy Story 3 a nomination in Best Adapted Screenplay, then I think that The Secret World of Arrietty, which was a Studio Ghibli film adapted from The Borrowers, which was a popular novel from the 1950s at some point.
And became a movie in the 90s.
And yeah, there have been multiple adaptations of that book, but I think that this was a particularly good one. And I imagine that it's hard for an anime film to get into the adapted screenplays or into the original screenplays.
I can't imagine how difficult that would be for
so there's that. The other one was Scott Pilgrim versus the World, because as I said, flawless execution of adapting that book. Flawless. So
yeah, and also
I
love Edgar Wright's very smart, quippy writing, and I think he doesn't get enough credit for it. So yeah.
So that's our best adapted screenplay. So now we move on to best original screenplay. So what are they supposed to be voting on here? I think they're supposed to be voting on the best original screenplay.
Yeah, but I mean, you can make the argument of how much are they highlighting the word original? Like, is it a very high concept original thing? Like Get Out won best original screenplay a few years ago. That's a very
I feel like that was pretty well deserved
kind of screenplay. Yeah, and that's also just a really well written movie in my mind. But yeah, I mean, what's the best written movie? I guess is
it's tough to say. So I like what you're saying there, that a lot of it is people focusing on the originality of the screenplay.
I will say though that I think I mentioned this before, but the eventual Best Picture winner almost always wins in their respective screenplay category. So usually whatever category your eventual best picture winner is in, it will win. So in this case, our winner was The King's Speech and original screenplay. That might have just been because the writing was on the wall that it was going to win Best Picture.
Yeah. So I forget, did I read the nominees? I have not yet.
No, go for it.
The best original screenplay nominees: The King's Speech, which did win; Another Year;
Mike
The
Lee.
Fighter; Inception; and The Kids Are All Right. So, did they get this one right?
I think it's questionable, because I think this could be one of those the most writing, because I think the monologues in The King's Speech stick out quite a lot, and I think that is something that maybe caught the attention of the voters more than other movies might have. I think personally the writing despite the fact that the film has quite a lot of exposition, I think the writing of Inception is pretty great, considering they have to immerse an audience into such a complex world and concept.
I agree, Hugo. That was my pick for who should have won.
That I think in this category specifically, I would pick Inception, because again, as Josh was saying before, I don't think writing is just the dialogue. It's also how things are structured, how
and the concept.
The concept that is on the page is essential to the success of the movie. It's not just visual effects.
For me, with Inception, the reason I think it should have won is that this is a concept that is hard enough to describe even with your visuals, but you also have to have pretty in-depth explanation for what is happening without being too hand-holdy, because otherwise that'll take you out of the immersion. I think it's a greater challenge to write the screenplay for Inception than it is to write the screenplay for The King's Speech. That's how I view it.
And it's, despite the fact that there is exposition, I think it's one of the best Christopher Nolan written films, because it's one of the ones where he kind of gets out of its own way the most, compared to some other ones where, like, for example, Tenet, which has a similar complex concept, that for me, the writing in that one is very heavy-handed.
Agreed.
I think he really gets out of his own way in Dunkirk, but I think I kind of agree that he gets out of his own. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of clunky exposition in Inception. I'm with both of you guys, by the way. I have plenty of qualms with Inception, particularly at its screenplay level, but it's bonkers to me that this did not win Best Original Screenplay, and it seems so obvious to me that it should have. I really enjoyed The King's Speech. I think that's a lovely little movie, and I think it's actually very well written as well. But I think that it won because of the aforementioned relationship between the Best Picture winner and the screenplay category. And when Get Out won its screenplay award, the Best Picture winner did not win its screenplay category. That was the year The Shape of Water won, and the two screenplay Oscars went to Get Out and Call Me by Your Name. But I think that's the only time since Titanic that that's happened. And I don't know. I feel like it probably should have happened here, where King's Speech, Best Picture, fine. Well, I don't know. We'll get into Best Picture what should have happened. Yeah. But I think Inception should have won Best Original Screenplay here easily, even though it's again I have my qualms, but it's just so obvious that that's such a feat of screenwriting and ingenuity.
I'm going to be trying to move forward at a little bit more of a clip because I've been letting us drag. But I do want to real quick ask: did you have any snubs in this category? I personally thought that these were among the best original screenplays of the year, so I wasn't that.
Black Swan.
I could see Black Swan, except I honestly think that Black Swan, now having seen Perfect Blue, I gotta say, I think Black Swan ends up in adapted screenplay.
They would never admit it, though.
It was an original at the WGA Awards, so I guess they would have been. The Oscars and Writers Guild Awards don't always agree on what's adapted and what's original, but probably would have been original, I would think.
Yeah, but so having seen Perfect Blue and having seen Black Swan, I was not aware of how much those movies really do parallel. So I was like, okay.
Shout out to Shutter Island always. Because for me, it's a perpetual snub in a lot of categories. That's adapted, though. That's adapted from a Dennis Lehane novel. It just popped into my head again.
So now we're moving on to Best Supporting Actor.
This will be quick for me.
Yeah, so what are they supposed to vote on for Best Supporting Actor? I'll just ask in general, real quick, Josh and Hugo, if you have any insight on it. What makes a character a supporting character?
Completely amorphous definition, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know.
So,
particularly if you look at this year's nominees.
Yeah, so I have an issue when we get to supporting actress. I have an issue with that category because I wish that they had a better, more clear definition of what makes something supporting. But as far as Best Supporting Actor, the nominees were Christian Bale in The Fighter, John Hawkes in Winter's Bone, Jeremy Renner in The Town, Mark Ruffalo in The Kids Are All Right, and Jeffrey Rush in The King's Speech. Did they get it right?
Yes.
I think this is it's a fantastic performance.
Yeah, no notes.
And fantastic.
I can understand Christian Bale winning. I think that it was a great performance. Makes a lot of sense. I would have preferred Jeffrey Rush win for The King's Speech because I like the character more, but that's purely a thing. What do I like better thing, not necessarily what was the better performance. So I'm fine with Christian Bale winning that. Did you have any snubs in mind?
Yes, I'm looking at the Bafta nominations, and the BAFTAs found room for Andrew Garfield to get nominated, which I would have liked for The Social Network. And also, the BAFTAs, instead of nominating Jeremy Renner for The Town, they nominated Pete Postlewaite for The Town, which would have been cool. What? He's awesome in this. You kidding me?
But it was a pretty small part, wasn't it?
That's true. He also died this year, though, so this would have been a posthumous award.
Okay. So that makes some sense.
Yeah, but I mean, he had a great. I mean, tragic loss for both his family and the industry because he's a great actor, but also two great movies in his final year of Inception
as well.
The Town.
Yeah. Shout out for me to Vincent Cassel in Black Swan.
I love him in everything, but he's great in Black Swan. Yeah, good call.
The one snub for me here, because I hadn't seen this movie until this week when I was watching stuff for this, but I think Aaron Eckhart deserved a nomination for his performance in Rabbit Hole. It is I highly suggest watching that because I'm sure that's a movie that a lot of people have overlooked. It was super impactful, very emotional, and the performance was much more varied than the performances that Mark Ruffalo or Jeremy Renner had to do in their movies, so I would have swapped one of them out for Aaron Eckhart.
What do we think of Matt Damon in True Grit?
I love him in True Grit. He's such a weird guy.
He's a weird guy. And
I like him a lot.
I could make an argument for him, but the problem is that my first the first impression of the character is so important to me, and the first impression you get of LaBeef is him saying, "Well, I thought about sneaking a kiss from
It was
this
the
14-year-old girl."
1860s or whatever. It was a different
That's
time,
a great
but
point.
yeah,
I know, but
agree.
it was like, just like, okay,
But
okay.
Haley Steinfeld's response to that is an all-time line in that movie, which says he basically says, "I was gonna give you a kiss, but now I'm thinking I might beat you with a belt," and she says, "Both would be equally unpleasant."
Yeah, something like that. It was excellent. It was excellent.
Doesn't she say undesirable or something?
Yeah, equally
Yeah,
undesirable.
Amazing.
But so that brings us to the Best Supporting Actress category, and here's where I have a little bit of a beef.
LaBeef.
A little bit of LaBeef. The nominees for Best Supporting Actress were the winner, Melissa Leo for The Fighter, Amy Adams for The Fighter, Helena Bonham Carter for The King's Speech, Haley Steinfeld for True Grit, and Jackie Weaver for Animal Kingdom. Admittedly, I still have not seen Animal Kingdom, so I don't have any
Never
thoughts.
heard of it.
I don't have any thoughts on that. But here's my beef. Haley Steinfeld is the main character of True Grit.
She 100% is the main character of True Grit. Yes. That
This
is category fraud.
this is category fraud.
100%. Yes.
It's very strange. The movie begins and ends with her.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's from her point of view for pretty much the entire time. She narrates parts of it. I believe the book is written in her voice, I want to say. So, entirely category fraud.
Yeah. So how do they get away with that?
I think
Honestly,
this has
I don't
a lot
know.
to do with the campaigning, I guess. They probably thought she had more of a shot as supporting actress than she did in the lead actress category. I don't know.
I understand the studio's desire to put her not up against Natalie Portman, because Natalie Portman was cleaning up at these awards. So I understand the studio's instinct to try to campaign her in supporting actress, but campaigns only get you so much, and voters can still kind of do what they want, as happened this year, for example.
They can identify which character is a supporting character and which one is a main character, and maybe that is why Haley Steinfeld did not win.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure she would have beaten Natalie Portman. I could make that argument that she could have, but also, I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe
I'm
the
talking
fact
about
that
in
she
this
was...
category. The reason she didn't win in supporting actress, I think, is possibly because people know that this
Interesting.
character
Yeah.
was not actually a supporting
Yeah.
character.
I'm sure some people would be hesitant to vote, but then again, Viola Davis won Best Supporting Actress for Fences in 2017,
And she
where
was one of
she's
the main
very,
characters in
very,
that.
very clearly the lead actress. She's the... I mean, Denzel Washington isn't in the last third of that movie. She is the definitive main character in the last third. Get off my Fences tangent. But, yeah, Haley Steinfeld, she may have lost some votes for that reason, that people knew that she wasn't a supporting actress. But I'm trying to think of what justification to put her in that category is, and maybe the fact that she was 14, and it was like more or less her debut performance. She's in a movie with Jeff Bridges, where he's like a more lead actor.
He's
type.
the imposing figure in the movie.
I guess, but like, I mean, to all of our points, like she's in it more than him, and like it's from her point of view. I don't know. I can't really defend this. She should have been lead.
But so, did they get it right? Are you guys happy with Melissa Leo winning this?
I didn't watch The Fighter this week, so I'm only going by my memory from 10 years ago, but I kind of wish Amy Adams had won instead of Melissa Leo. Also, the fact that Amy Adams is like my favorite actress, and she's like 0 for 6 at the Oscars. So I mentioned, I think last week, that Arrival is my favorite performance of hers, but The Fighter might be like number two or three. So,
What about you, Hugo?
I think Haley Steinfeld's performance is something that I enjoyed more, but with the caveat that it feels weird for her to be in this category in the first place. I think Melissa Leo is pretty great in The Fighter. I also think Amy Adams is great in The Fighter, but I wouldn't say that they got it wrong. Maybe I would have voted for Amy Adams over Melissa Leo, but
I agree with what you're saying. I would have, because I liked Haley Steinfeld's performance the best, I would have voted for Haley Steinfeld. She would have been my pick. But I also truly hated Melissa Leo's character in The Fighter, which you're kind of supposed to.
Point.
So in that way, she did really nail the performance. So, I think it's fine. I'm fine with that. I didn't have any snubs. Did you guys have any snubs in mind for Best Supporting Actress?
No, not for
Mila
actress,
Kunis.
no. Mila Kunis
Mila
was
Kunis
pretty
got
good.
into like the
That's
SAG
true.
Awards and Black Swan. She was like she's right on the outside looking in here, so she's probably a snub.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we move on to Best Actor.
Best actor.
The nominees were the winner, Colin Firth for The King's Speech, Javier Bardem for Beautiful, Jeff Bridges for True Grit, Jesse Eisenberg for The Social Network, James Franco for 127 Hours. Did they get this right?
Hugo, what do you think?
I'm gonna jump right ahead to my snub, because I think Leo for Shutter Island should 1000% be in this category. I don't know if he should have won. I think he's the performance that I remember the most from that year. But that said, Colin Firth is pretty fantastic in this role, and he carries the film, and he makes subject matter that, at least from my point of view, wouldn't be something that I'm that interested in. He carries it and makes it interesting, because he sort of brings a human element to that character. So I'm not mad about it, although I will say Leo, big snub, and James Franco, I think, is absolutely brilliant in 127 Hours.
I love Colin Firth's performance in The King's Speech. I think it's really good. I don't think it should have won, though. I'm looking at Jesse Eisenberg playing Mark Zuckerberg, and again, with 10 years of hindsight, Jesse Eisenberg's spent a decade trying to get out from underneath that performance, and he's still, like, it overshadows everything he does. Like, everything he does now is in the shadow of his Mark Zuckerberg performance. The point that, like, he's not still doing that performance, but, like, people kind of, like, project that onto everything he does now.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is really, like, an iconic, great performance. I think Mark Zuckerberg himself is also out underneath this performance and trying to get out from underneath it. It's a towering performance from Jesse Eisenberg. So I want to shout that out. But so he, I think, could have easily won. I really like what James Franco's doing in 127 Hours, but Jeff Bridges in True Grit is so good. And if we're, kind of having our druthers and giving out the Oscars we think should, Jeff Bridges was never going to win this because he won Best Actor the previous year for Crazy Heart. So what I would do is take away his Oscar for Crazy Heart, give him the Oscar this year for True Grit, and I guess give the 2009 Best Actor to maybe Jeremy Renner for The Hurt Locker. Or if we want to just do a little switchies, we could give the 2009 Best Actor to Colin Firth for A Single Man, and then give the 2010 Best Actor to Jeff Bridges for True Grit. So whatever we want to do.
I mean,
You're an encyclopedia, man.
There were a lot of great performances this year. Like all of these Best Actor nominees, all the ones that I've seen, because I haven't seen Beautiful, but all of these are excellent performances in one way or another. Jesse Eisenberg is like, I hadn't really seen much of actual Mark Zuckerberg before seeing this movie, but now, again, with years have passed, we've seen a lot more of Mark Zuckerberg. Jesse Eisenberg kind of nails it.
We take for granted how good that performance is.
Yes.
We honestly really take for granted.
I think it's because it's such a the range of the character is not as big.
Agreed.
For Mark Zuckerberg.
I think nowadays we just kind of assume that's what Mark Zuckerberg is like, and we assume that's what Jesse Eisenberg is really like. We just project that performance onto both of those real life people.
I watched some of the congressional hearings. Mark Zuckerberg is exactly like Jesse Eisenberg.
He's not, though. Like, I get it. I get what you're saying. But
I mean,
like
the way his speech pattern, his that sort of thing. I really do think Jesse Eisenberg did a good job there. So I think personally, they got it right with Colin Firth, because I think that role required the greatest range in the performance. The scenes where he's crazy angry and swearing like a madman, and then the scenes
forget the blessed shilling,
where he's the prim and proper king and all that.
I like that movie.
Yeah, I do too.
Movie. We'll talk about it in a minute, but I like it.
Very very wide range. So I think they got that one right. Personally, any other snubs we want to talk about?
No, okay. I'm just. I think Leonardo DiCaprio, just in general, should have twice the nominations that he has.
Because it's come up a lot, I want to say that Shutter Island was scheduled to be a fall 2009 release to make an Oscar play in 2009, and for some reason, it was delayed till February of 2010. I don't really know why, but that's why it didn't really appear in any of these Oscar races, because it came out in February.
Is it possible that I guess his performance in Inception is far from the most, iconic Leonardo DiCaprio performance, but is it possible that because he had two movies that year that he couldn't get enough traction for either one of them to get the nominations? Is that a thing?
I mean, you can split the vote against yourself, I'm sure, but I don't know. I mean, they also, like, again, Shutter Island was a February release, and Inception was, I assume, a July release, because that's when all of Nolan's movies come out. So those are both not ideal times for Oscar plays, because they got to have a lot of legs to still be relevant come, the fall when nominations are being talked about.
And also, to be completely fair, Shutter Island, a film that upon release wasn't as highly regarded as I think it is now. I think it's kind of been reevaluated as one of the better Scorsese films of recent times. But
that's a big statement, but I agree that it's being reevaluated for sure in recent years. Yeah.
One of the better, meaning,
sure.
as not necessarily, as great as some of his...
It's certainly not less of Scorsese. Let's say that, yeah.
So
whatever that means.
Let's dive into the Best Actress category.
Yeah, and let's move it along quicker.
Yes. The nominees were Natalie Portman, who won for Black Swan, Annette Bening for The Kids Are All Right, Nicole Kidman for Rabbit Hole, Jennifer Lawrence for Winter's Bone, and Michelle Williams for Blue Valentine. Did they get it right?
They got it right. Portman should have won.
100%.
Haley Steinfeld should have been in the category, but other than that, I'm good. Natalie Portman's great. I'm ready to move on.
Yep.
I'll say it's kind of weird that Annette Bening is the lead actress, and what's Julianne Moore then? It's kind of odd. Again,
co-lead.
You can have more than one lead, yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, yeah, I completely agree.
I would say, just to give it a shout out, Nicole Kidman in Rabbit Hole was fantastic and probably would be my runner-up. And by a closer margin, I think most people would think. Really fantastic performance. And God, what a gut punch of a movie that one is.
I really like Winter's Bone, too, and Jennifer Lawrence Winter's Bone. I want to shout that one out. She's great in that.
Okay, so then the only snub I had for this was that Haley Steinfeld should have been here instead of Best Supporting Actress, but we talked about that, so we're moving on. Now let's get on to the directing. So real quick, Josh, what are they supposed to vote on? What are they voting on with Best Directing? What does Best Directing mean?
I don't know. We don't have time for this. I don't really know, so let's just get to the nominees.
Okay, so the nominees for Best Directing were Tom Hooper for The King's Speech, Darren Aronofsky for Black Swan, David O. Russell for The Fighter, David Fincher for The Social Network, and Joel and Ethan Coen for True Grit.
Conspicuously absent Deborah Granick for Winter's Bone, and whoever directed The Kids Are All Right. I don't even know whose name that was.
Again, no Christopher Nolan.
True. He would wait until Dunkirk to get his Best Director nomination. He was notably nominated for the DGA Award for this, the Director's Guild Award, which usually lines up pretty closely with the Oscars. And I think this is actually his second DGA Award nomination, and the second time that the Oscars did not line up and did not see fit to give him a director nomination. I think that this Oscar... So this went to Tom Hooper for The King's Speech, and this is one of the more egregious snubs in recent Oscar history for me. The fact that David Fincher did not win this for The Social Network. I think that was the consensus when it happened, and it's been only gotten a bigger consensus in the intervening decade. Even the Bafta Awards, which are the British Oscars, effectively... even the Bafta Awards, which just gave The King's Speech everything, even they gave Best Director to David Fincher. And the Oscars did not, and they went to Tom Hooper instead.
I don't know what they saw in the direction of that film, because I think even one of the common
it's
criticisms...
well-directed, but...
It's well-directed, but one of the common criticisms of Tom Hooper is that he kind of does stylish cinematography and stylish directorial choices that sometimes don't really fit the tone of the scenes. And if you look at the movie and go back, there's a lot of weird stuff in there. That
I really liked all that. In fact, I would say that I was going to say they might have gotten it right. I don't think they did, because I do think it should have been The Social Network. But there's some scenes in The King's Speech where very creatively shown scenes, like when there multiple lessons are occurring and the camera swings in on the wall and then it pulls out and now they're in another thing. Just some creatively shot stuff. I can
montages.
In the montages, yeah. I mean, there's some good stuff that I do really like in that movie. But you're right, The Social Network is better. In almost every facet of what the director would be involved in. So,
yeah, for me personally, I would have picked 3 out of 5 of these over Tom Hooper, but Fincher would be my winner as well.
Also, I mean, I think I've said it before, but look at just the linear progression of Tom Hooper's filmography and the quality and the dip in quality. You have The King's Speech 2010, Les Mis in 2012, The Danish Girl in 2015, and then Cats in 2019. And it's just a straight line down in quality, like
I think
Yeah.
the King's
He peaked.
Speech has gotten a little bit of a bad rap because people so much think The Social Network deserved it more. That
Well, I think we need to talk about the next category as well to have this conversation.
fair enough. That's a good point. So we'll move on.
go ahead
We'll get
and do
into. I guess I should ask. Did you have any snubs?
Let's just keep going. We're over an hour in. We gotta keep going.
Best Picture. The nominees were the winner, The King's Speech, Black Swan, The Fighter, Inception, The Kids Are All Right, 127 Hours, The Social Network, Toy Story 3, True Grit, Winter's Bone, and that is it. Oh, yeah. So, what?
Good list of nominees, by the way. There's
Yeah,
some
great
good
list of
movies in
nominees.
there. Yeah, really good movies in there. And The King's Speech won, and The Social Network should have won. I think that at the time, this was egregious at the time, but like a lot of people were like, okay, fine, whatever. The King's Speech is a pretty Oscar movie, whatever. It's pleasant, it's nice. But I think that again, in the intervening decade, particularly seeing the career trajectory of Tom Hooper and the career trajectory of David Fincher, and seeing what Facebook has become in the intervening decade, The Social Network just gets better by the day. And again, Hugo mentioned it's one of the best movies of the decade. I completely agree. If not the best movie of the decade, I think it's one of the best movies to come out in the last 20 years. And it's crazy to me that The King's Speech won Best Picture. And Grizz, what you were about to say is that people kind of, I think, unfairly malign The King's Speech because of what Oscars it's won. I'm one of those people, by the way. I unfairly malign The King's Speech because it's Oscar win. I watched it this week, and I mentioned to you guys in the chat that like I forgot how much I like it. It actually is really, really good. And I'm far from immune to its charms, even if it is kind of maybe a little manipulative in its charm. But I really enjoy it. It's just not The Social Network, and I can't believe that this beat The Social Network.
You agree with that, Hugo?
For me, yeah, I think on a personal level, my favorite films in this list are Inception and Toy Story 3, but The Social
Same.
Network.
Those are
I think,
my favorites on the list as well.
Yeah, I think, but if we're looking at what should be the best picture of the year, I think The Social Network is a pretty clear winner. So yeah, it's very strange for me that The King's Speech won over it.
I can form the mindset to understand why The King's Speech won, but I can't agree with it. Yeah.
It's good movie, but it also does feel a little bit like Oscar bait the movie.
Right. Okay. So that always has kind of that reputation, and I usually push back against that. I think people maybe overemphasize what Oscar bait even means, but like I tried to sit down and watch it this week, completely detached from the Oscar context, to see if I could just relate to the movie on its own terms, and yet I forgot that first title card comes up, the Weinstein Company, and I forgot this is a Weinstein movie, and those guys famously like campaigned so hard for Oscars to a fault, and yeah, that kind of is not. That's not a good notch in the Oscar bait column, is the fact that the opening title card is the Weinstein Company.
There's a lot of things that the Weinstein Company is famous for now that...
Yeah, we don't have to get into that now. They suck.
Yeah.
We hate them.
They suck.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, so as far as what I actually would have thought, for me, what would have been my favorite, Toy Story 3 and Inception are my favorites of the year. So if I had my druthers, Toy Story 3 would have been the best picture because of all that it accomplished. I concluded a trilogy beautifully, absolutely heartfelt and brilliant voice performances and beautiful art. And I just think all around Toy Story 3 is almost a flawless animated movie to me. What do you got, Josh?
I want to say that I think I said this in the chat earlier this week, but I don't want to undersell how much Beethoven's Seventh Symphony contributed to the King's Speech Best Picture win. That's at least my theory. That if they chose any other piece of music for him to play over him giving that eponymous speech, other than Beethoven's Seventh, I think the movie would be lesser in people's minds, because that piece of music is doing a lot of heavy lifting there in elevating that last section of the movie for me personally.
I mean, you're not wrong. I love that whole setup for
when
that
that
whole
first
speech.
chord hits, you're like, oh my god, we're rocking now, man. And then when that symphony really gets rocking, you're rocking along with it. I love it.
But yeah, Toy Story 3 would have been my pick. And if I could pick a snub to, I can't stress enough how much I enjoyed Rabbit Hole. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I would have dropped Winter's Bone for that in a heartbeat.
No way. Put respect on Winter's name, man. Winter's awesome.
Yeah, for me, snubs, again, mentioned it 1,000 times, but Shutter Island, and also I think the film Blue Valentine, which is a film that we haven't mentioned, but I think it could have sneaked into this Best Picture category and maybe even some of the acting categories as well. Great little movie.
It's a tough watch.
It is a tough watch. Very, very depressing, but very, very well made.
Yeah. So that's that's the categories we were doing today. Any last thoughts on the main topic here, guys, before we dive into 127 hours?
We're running too long to have additional thoughts. Let's keep going.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Unless you want to beat the Oscar telecast in runtime. Which
Well,
we can if you like.
I don't think we could possibly do that.
I don't know if my bladder could handle that, but...
So now we move on to our main, or not our main topic, our film to remember, which is 127 Hours, which we picked because of the Best Picture nominees, we at least I kind of felt that it was one of the more often overlooked, certainly in the list of the movies that were nominated that year. Obviously, having talked about it, you know that it was well received, so it's not like it's a forgotten movie, but that's why we chose to watch it for our film to remember this week. So some boilerplate stuff on 127 Hours, produced and directed by Danny Boyle. This was his first film following Slumdog Millionaire. So talk about, back-to-back, hits here. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, which famously won Best Director and Best Picture.
Yeah.
Slumdog Millionaire. Yep.
It's based on the true story of Aaron Ralston, who gets pinned by a boulder while out climbing. This story is about the 127 hours from when Aaron woke up that day to when he was put under anesthesia after being rescued.
I always figured that was just the time that he was trapped. Is that not true?
According to the trivia...
I trust your research.
Yeah,
I trust your research.
trivia that
I researched myself. I
on
just assumed that. Yeah.
They said 127 was from when he woke up that day to when he's put under anesthesia. And
had you guys heard of Aaron Ralston before this movie?
Very, just passing, you hear it on Sports Center.
Yeah.
That sort of deal.
I was 6 years old when the events happened, and I was 14 when the movie came out. So
sure.
No.
Well, before we recorded, I sent both of you guys the Sports Illustrated article "Extreme Measures," written by Rick Riley, which came out in 2003, which is an article about Aaron Ralston. And I read that when I was 13 and was just blown away by it. And I still remembered it 7 years later when the movie came out. So I was very, very excited for this movie because the story is incredible, and I remember reading about it when it happened.
Yeah, so I did not have super in-depth knowledge of it, but I had, it was news
sure.
when this happened for sure.
I mean, it is a news story for sure.
The film was based on Ralston's memoir Between a Rock and a Hard Place.
Great title.
Fantastic title.
Yeah.
Way to have a sense of humor about the situation, my guy. That's so good. Written by the movie is written by Danny Boyle and Simon Beaufoy. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name there. Co-produced by Christian Coulson and John Smithson and scored by A.R. Rahman. Boyle had worked with Beaufoy, Coulson, and Rahman on Slumdog Millionaire, which won Best Picture. So
I believe they all won Oscars. I believe everyone you just named won an Oscar for Slumdog Millionaire. I'm pretty sure.
So,
yeah.
Bring the team back together. Let's run it back. Do it again. I love when you get a team of great people and they work on multiple movies. I love that.
Yeah, it's nice.
Ralston has confirmed that there are only a couple of scenes in the movie that differed from his actual experiences. So, but he said the majority of the movie is, quote, so factually accurate, it is as close to a documentary as you can get and still be a drama.
Maybe less Scooby-Doo in the real life situation, I would imagine.
Maybe less Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I think from what I read, the whole encounter with the two girls at the beginning of the film is fictionalized. And in fact, he did meet two girls, but he sort of showed them the way. There was no fun.
He showed them some climbing tips. And that was the extent of that interaction. But this was certainly much more fun. So
I want to talk about that sequence with Kate Mara and Amber Tamblyn, but
and we certainly
get out
will.
the boilerplate.
We'll get into the spoiler stuff.
Yeah.
I see Josh mentioned that in the movie Aaron records himself and leaving messages for his family should he be found. And the tapes are real, but they are locked away, and they were somewhere, and only the people that they were addressed to have ever seen them, except for Danny Boyle and
Right.
and Simon Bufoy, who were
They're-
allowed to view the tapes.
Yes. To recreate the reality, as you were just saying, that it's close to documentary as possible. But it's very jealously guarded tapes. Like, very few people have seen the actual tapes that Ralston made.
This movie was all over the festival circuit, as Josh mentioned earlier. It premiered at Telluride, then shown again at the Toronto International Film Festival and the London Film Festival, where it continually gained additional buzz. And well deserved.
A lot of buzz out of TIFF, for real, like a lot of buzz.
But one part of the buzz about this movie was that the trailer and the film itself were apparently causing some people to get ill.
Not the trailer, right? Like
that's what my research said. The trailer,
because I remember when in 2010, like hearing reports of people like passing out at like Telluride in Toronto while watching this, but I don't remember any reports of the trailer making anybody sick.
Yeah, but certainly the movie itself did, because people were throwing up or becoming lightheaded, and people having panic attacks,
passing out. Yeah. Apparently.
Josh, you have a note here.
Yeah, I just want to say, you mentioned the trailer in this bullet point in the outline, and this is one of my favorite trailers of all time. I can't really explain why. I think it's because I knew the Aaron Ralston story before the movie came out, and I was a fan of Slumdog Millionaire, so like I was very much anticipating this movie. And then when the trailer finally dropped, it has that Band of Horses song that's really good, and like I watched the trailer over and over and over again, and like the trailer makes me cry. Even like to this day, the trailer makes me cry. So I just want great trailer, one of my favorites of all time. Can't really explain why, but it's great and I love it. So I'm shouting it out.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember the trailer at all. I just remember hearing about the movie once it was in theaters, and I was like, okay, I'll go see that.
I've seen the trailer so many times, I can tell you every second of what happens in it.
But so the question I wanted to ask is, did the movie make you sick? Did you feel sick at all watching this movie?
For me, it was actually the part that made me kind of squeamish was the anticipation, not of the actual scene of the amputation, but of the scene where he would fall. I think that the way it's directed and the way the film kind of has several different moments where you could say, oh, this is where he falls. And then when it actually happens, it's kind of unexpected. I think makes that sequence really tense for me.
True.
Like I was feeling the tension. I could feel my body get really tense during that scene. And while the amputation was something that I was kind of expecting, and I knew it was going to happen, and I kind of knew when it was going to happen. And so it also, movie violence doesn't really make me squeamish. So no, it didn't bother me.
The first watching it this week, I was okay, but watching it in theaters, I had sweaty palms like the entire movie in anticipation of the amputation scene, and that's for a number of reasons. Number one, I'd heard the reports of people at TIFF passing out, and also like the Extreme Measures Sports Illustrated article I mentioned earlier. That's mostly about like the mechanics of how he cut his arm off. So like I knew all the gory details, and I was like very scared of what it was going to look like actually seeing it. So I was nervous the entire movie. And they even have like a few fake outs in the movie where like he gets the knife out and hits his arm, but like he doesn't actually begin amputation in earnest till the final 15 minutes. So like I was very scared watching the movie, but I think it was mostly okay. It didn't like make me sick physically.
It's funny Hugo mentioned that like, you know, movie violence doesn't really bother him, and for me that's the case as well. But something about knowing this was a true story made it a little like make me not quite queasy, but a little more uncomfortable with it.
Well, like a guy did this. Like you have to reckon with the fact that somebody actually did this. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say that did certainly make it more affecting, like on me compared to normal movie violence. But at the same time, it wasn't necessarily the part that really bothered me. It was the desperation of the situation got to me much more than the actual scene of the amputation.
And
although the nerve ending thing,
Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk about. I think I have that later in the outline, but
yeah, we're gonna get into the spoilers section for
the
that
nerve.
stuff.
The nerve thing is. I completely agree, Hugo. But shout out to the visual effects team who like basically created a fake arm that James Franco could cut into and like perform surgery on effectively. It looks really, really real.
Really
obviously,
good.
people pass out, but great job, visual effects team.
So the last question basically I had was, what made it Oscar nomination worthy?
Well, and I answered on the outline that it is an excellent and exhaustive lead performance. I think having a good lead performance in this entire movie is a good way to get more attention, particularly from the Academy, and they certainly have this. And this is also a very demanding performance, both like physically and emotionally. And he's the only guy in it for pretty much the whole movie. So like, there's a lot on James Franco's shoulders, and he really delivers. And I think that really elevates the movie. But also, the fact it's a true story also probably helped make it Oscar worthy. But also, I think it's like really, really well made. You know, there's so many constraints on the filmmaking here because it's a guy stuck against a rock. Like, what can you really show? But like,
Right.
I think it's really beautifully shot. It's really beautifully edited. And I think that they really did a lot with a little. And I think it's incredibly emotional and cathartic ultimately. Like this movie really gets to me emotionally, and it really works for me, particularly the last like 15 minutes. Like it's really cathartic and really heartfelt, and I think that that has a lot going for it. So I think it's a completely deserving nominee, and I really love this movie.
As far as that catharsis, you're absolutely right. That's what makes the movie for me, and
Yes.
a huge part of that for me is the music, because the music is great at building the tension throughout this whole movie. Very kind of reminds me of Uncut Gems in the way that the music contributes to the tension that you're feeling. But then also the music contributes to that emotional high you get at the end of the movie because it builds beautifully, and it's oh god, I get chills thinking about that.
Wait for the spoilers. I want to talk a little bit more in depth about this part later, but let's. Yeah.
Okay, well, so now we're going to get into spoilers now. So I guess real quick before we go into spoilers, general thumbs up, thumbs down. Did you like this movie?
Thumbs up for me.
Absolutely thumbs up. Absolutely thumbs up. Yeah.
So then now we're going into spoilers. So I mean, we don't have to do too much of a plot summary. Guy goes for a hike, meets some people.
Doesn't tell anybody he's going to a hike.
Doesn't tell anybody where he's going, and when the only people he does meet, he doesn't even actually fully explain where he's going to them either. So there's no one who knows where he is. And then, of course, he falls, gets pinned by a rock, and is stuck there for several days, as he's running out of food and water. And
no one's coming to look for him.
No one's looking for him because it'll be several days before he's supposed to be at work again. And that'll be the first time that anyone will know that he's not where he's supposed to be. So,
because there's also an element of the story where he's broken up with a girlfriend, so he's kind of alone. He doesn't really answer the phone a lot when his mother calls him, so she wouldn't think it's weird that he's not responding. So there's a series of different things about him.
Like he really set himself up to be screwed.
Yeah, that makes him disappearing for a few days not necessarily something that people would be alarmed about.
But so then, like we said, he gets pinned and goes through all the steps of grief with the situation, more or less, and then eventually cuts his arm off. It breaks his arm off, if we're being perfectly honest.
He breaks it. He has to break 2 bones in order to detach himself from this rock.
And then descends from the cliff and makes his way back using one arm while bleeding profusely out of the other. Yeah. And then he runs into some hikers who he's finally rescued. So that's the plot.
In the meantime, I think another important element are the tapes that we've already mentioned. Because a lot of the kind of the performance from Franco and a lot of the drama of the film comes from those tapes, where we see him sort of accepting that this is probably the end, and he sent these tapes to his mother, to the former girlfriend, and we see a bunch of stuff that he records, and we see also several scenes where he's kind of losing his mind because he's stuck there and he's alive, but he's very dehydrated. Delirious. He only has a few burritos to
he only gets 16 minutes of sunlight a day.
Yeah, and he's just there waiting to die essentially.
So Josh has in here that it was an hour and a half runtime. The first 16 minutes and the last 14 or so are away from the boulder. And he was asking, what do you think of that half hour before and after the boulder compared to the hour he's with the boulder?
I just kind of want to talk about these sequences because I think that, again, like we kind of already mentioned, that they're so constrained in what kind of story they're telling because it is ultimately a story of a guy pinned to a rock. So, like, what are you going to show before that? What are you going to show after that? And how much are you going to show before that? How much are you going to show after that? I think that, like, when you're sitting down to watch this movie, you're just, like, waiting for him to be pinned to the rock, like Hugo was saying. So, like, you can't get, you kind of want to get him at the rock as late as possible, but not so late that people start getting, like, bored with what you're doing and, like, anticipating him getting there. And I think they hit it right in the pocket. And like I really enjoy these first 15 minutes when he's not at the Rock yet. I think, setting him up as a loner, and like the opening images of the movie are like a bunch of people in crowds contrasted in a split screen with Aaron by himself and him ignoring calls from his mom and all that kind of stuff, and him passing the bikers and like giving them a look that he's a loner and not with a group, like the bikers are with a group and that kind of stuff. They just do a lot of really good setup in these first 15 minutes, and also like the wide shots of the canyons as he's hiking alone. Like first of all, they give you a good like wide vistas that we will be deprived for most of this movie to contrast what's to come. But also like this is such a crazy beautiful part of our country, or at least of me and Greta's country, Hugo. And I feel like it's not really a part that most people are even aware of. And like I mentioned off mic that I took a road trip to Utah in 2009, so right before this movie came out, and like I went to Canyonlands and I went to Arches, and it is like insanely beautiful. So like I just love the first 10 minutes gets to like appreciate all of this stuff, but also like the subtle storytelling setups that happen in these first 15 minutes I think are really, really good. And we've already talked about the last 15 minutes, but I mean, what do you guys think of the non-boulder sequences?
I think that's the setup for that. That's what makes the tension work.
Completely agree. Like they just got to do so many things right in this story, and I think they do like pretty much all of them right. Like I just think it's really
because
really
it's
conceived.
This is the sort of story that would be very easy to make boring.
Yes, the bad version of this would be so easy to make, and they made the good version. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see in here you were talking about how the post-escape stuff really works for you. It's so triumphant, and we did talk about that.
It really, really works for me so much. But also, like, when he ultimately cuts his arm off, we're in spoilers, right?
Yeah, we're in spoilers.
So when he cuts his arm off and, like, pulls back from the rock, there's, like, a moment of, like, calm and silence. The score had been building up, and suddenly the score just drops out. And, like, the editing had been, like, quick shots cut together, and suddenly it was just, like, longer shots, just a real moment of calm and like you said, Grizz, like surprise.
The look of surprise on his face.
Yeah, and like
even though he knew it, he was doing it. He knew he was doing it, and it's still
so like it's suddenly so foreign to not be attached to the rock, both for Aaron and also for us, for the audience. We've been with him in this rock for the last hours. Like once he detaches, you're like, oh my god, like what do I do now? Like I forgot what it's like to not be attached to that rock. And he very smartly packs up his stuff because the hard part's over, but he's not out of the woods yet. He's still got to like go find help and everything.
He's got to go rappel down a cliff.
Yeah. And everything after he detaches from that rock works for me. You mentioned, Grizz, earlier, the triumphant score, and when he yells out to the hikers,
I'm cheering in my head.
Yes.
Yes.
Like
do it. You can do it.
When he yells out to the hikers, and like the moment the hikers turn around, the score like really kicks in. And then when more hikers show up and like the camera focuses on the water, like the guy like immediately just pulls out a water bottle and hands it to him. And then when it's a shot of Aaron looking down, and then like the wind from the helicopter is what you see before you see the helicopter itself, and like it's so triumphant and again cathartic for both Aaron and the audience, and it really works for me in every way. And the reason this movie may have gotten a Best Picture nomination, it really makes you happy as you leave the theater. It's very hopeful, and also shout out to like the moment like right before he cuts his arm off when like the light is all golden, he's like hallucinating his future son in front of him. I love that moment, and that moment really gets to me and works for me also. And
Aaron Ralston said that is a very true thing, that he was having these dreams and hallucinations about the things that he was going to miss out on in the rest of his life. And it was when he had this thought of his future child, that was when he's like, okay, let's cut our arm off.
I'm going to give it a try. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he also famously said that if he had done it before, he probably wouldn't have survived, because the fact that he was so dehydrated meant that his blood coagulated more, and he didn't lose as much blood as he would have. Which is an interesting wrinkle into it. Yeah.
Speaking of things that he would have missed out on had he not survived this, what do we think of the stuff with Kate Mara and Amber Tamlin in the front 15 minutes of this movie?
I think it serves a purpose in the film because it sets up him as a character outside of the specific situation that we're going to see him in for an hour and 15 minutes.
True. Yeah.
But at the same, I don't think it's the strongest part of the film. I think they could have figured out how to do something a little more interesting. It it is a little bit of a weird interaction. The fact that we see them, even the fact that we see them on video afterwards, kind of showing their boobs to him because they liked him, it's kind of rubbed me the wrong way just a little bit.
I'm a little creeped out by a lot of it. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I think this whole. I mean, yeah, I'm a little creeped out by that, and I don't love that part later when he's pinned.
Where he masturbates?
Yeah, it's just
not great. Yeah. Probably my least favorite part of the movie, actually, is when he masturbates.
Agreed, 100%. But I do think that this whole sequence at the beginning here serves an important purpose for the narrative, and that is showing that Aaron Ralston is an expert climber.
Yes.
That he's not some
and he knows the area. Yeah.
He knows the area really well. He knows secret ways to get to cool things. This is a very knowledgeable climber, and I think that's really important to show that, you know, this sort of accident didn't happen because Aaron is inexperienced or doesn't know what he's doing. It's a freak accident, and so I do think that does serve an important narrative purpose.
And I also, even though I don't enjoy this whole sequence as a whole, I do like that they invite him to a party later.
Yes,
because as soon as they say, "Hey, you should come to this party later," the audience is like, "Oh,
he's not gonna make that party."
That sucks. And obviously when you have your arm crushed by a boulder and you're pinned there for 5 days, missing a party is probably literally the last thing on your mind, but it also gives an immediacy of what he's losing by being here. Obviously he could miss out on having a son, as you just said, Grizz, but also him envisioning the party is a very good, immediate, tangible thing to show that the world is continuing without him.
Yeah.
And that's just such a lonely thought that he has while he's there.
He's going to miss out on Scooby-Doo.
And he's going to miss out on Mountain Dew and Scooby-Doo and all that good stuff, and, possibly getting laid again. And honestly, though, that sucks. And, I don't love the fantasy sequences where he, where he, in his mind, goes to the party. I don't love that, but I do love the idea that, that's there and he's here. And he could be there, but instead he's here because of the choices he's made. And that's, really effective, I think.
Yeah, it gives us another element to the character. And I think, building on what Grizz said about him being an expert climber, I think it also serves to kind of make the movie a cautionary tale, because any expert climber will tell you, always have a GPS, always tell someone where you're going, always, most expert climbers don't want to go alone. It's kind of a unwritten rule that you go with somebody else, and the people who go alone are kind of considered, these people are kind of looking for trouble and potentially could end up in a situation like this.
In my research about this movie, I found a quote-unquote fun fact that the number of accidents that have occurred in Canyonlands Park has increased exponentially since this movie came out. Wow. Because people were going to see the place.
Yeah, don't do that. Official podcast stance. Don't looking for Aaron Ralston's arm site.
That's weird.
Hugo, to your point, though, I think that they really do a great job of, showing him to be an expert climber, but also showing his arrogance a little bit in that he thinks that he can go do this by himself. And, they really play that up as a character flaw, the fact that he is a loner and doesn't need other people and thinks that he fancies himself this, as he says in the movie, pardon the language, a hard fucking hero. That really works for this character and for the situation he puts himself in. It really does put the onus for the situation not just on a freak occurrence, which it was a freak occurrence, but also puts it a lot on him, which makes the lesson he learns and the arc he goes through more meaningful, and I think it really works.
So I'm going to move on to one of my next questions that I just think is a fun, quick question. When would you have given up? Let's be real. I would never have gotten to the point where I'm cutting my arm off.
so in the movie, he, takes inventory of his stuff in a very Castaway-esque scene where he takes inventory of what tools are at his disposal, takes his little pocket knife and starts chipping away, and spends the first few hours of his captivity chipping away. And then in the movie, he drops the knife after a few hours. I'm dead then. I'm dead after I drop the knife.
That's the quitting point.
I'm going to starve. I'm buzzard food.
Perfectly honest, I would have given up while riding my bike to the canyon. That's when I would have given up.
Yeah, he bikes 17 miles before he gets stuck here. He tells the girls that.
What about you, Hugo? What would have been your breaking point?
I don't know. I think I would have broken down psychologically more than physically, because I think the fear and the dread of the knowledge that you're going to die is what would have
slowly too
got to me. Yeah, very slow. I think that's what would have gotten to me. Like, I think the greatest achievement of his is not even the physical feat that he did, is just having, like, being able to stay in the moment to the point that you're able to actually go through with it, and
he kept his wits
have
about
enough
him.
of
he did keep his wits
yeah
about him,
to just have enough mental sanity in that situation to actually get out of it is astounding.
Josh,
I love that, like, you know, like I keep saying, like, there's a lot of narrative constraints on this movie, and I think they do a good job working with what they have. But, like, you think, how are they going to keep him attached to this boulder for over an hour of the movie's runtime and keep it interesting? But I love that they have him go through, like, the stages of grief when he's attached to this boulder. Like, literally the, you know, denial, anger, coping, depression, acceptance. I think that's the bargaining, accepting, you know, whatever the 5 stages are. He goes through all 5. And, like, you can clearly distinctly point to the 5 things he's going through. And, like, I think that's, like, accurate. Like, I think if I were him, I would start by being like, there's no way I'm attached to this. There's no way I'm stuck here. Like, and he refuses to believe that this thing won't move. At one point he yells, "This is so unfair," I think, like, when he's still trying to move the rock. And then he gets angry. He gets really angry. I would get pretty angry too. But then, you know, like you said, he keeps his wits about him. What
I think is so best about them showing those stages of grief there is that they add one last stage where he says, "Forget all that. I'm not giving up." Yeah, and that's what makes this so powerful.
I love that too, man. Like, it works for me so much.
But next question, is this movie a bit too Danny Boyle?
What do you mean by too Danny Boyle?
So, have you guys seen many of Danny Boyle's other movies?
I've seen Slumdog Millionaire. I've seen Steve Jobs.
Yeah,
I've seen
Trainspotting.
Yeah.
So Trainspotting in particular is the one that I want to focus on. They do the thing where they do this sudden close up, or like they do a close up on something weird, like in Trainspotting they'll show you, like, you know, cooking meth or, you know, whatever,
or climbing a toilet,
or he does these sudden, you know, like interstitial images, like not even necessarily things that are happening in the actual scene. He'll cut in images from other places or like sporting events, like you see in this movie. It's a stylistic
the dream
choice.
Sequences.
Yeah, it's a stylistic thing that I think I've seen in a few of Danny Boyle's movies where he does that, and sometimes that takes me out of the movie a little bit. In this one in particular,
I thought personally it was fantastically directed. I think all the stylistic flourishes made this story that I think is a simple story that for 95 minutes could have gotten a little samey after a while, but I think his the way he uses his style to have, you know, the extreme close-ups of the water. The movie made me so thirsty in those sequences.
That's true.
Agreed.
That's true. That was very impactful.
The way it portrays the water and the food, and the way the dream sequences are shot and intercut within the movie. That dream sequence where he gets free because it starts raining. There's so many different little elements. It was, but there's so many different little stylistic choices that I think keep the movie interesting, even if the story is relatively simple. Like, if you film this as too straightforward, you either make it an hour long, or it could potentially get a little samey, a little
That's
bit
true.
boring. Even though the story is obviously an amazing story.
When I first watched this movie, I gave it a perfect 10. I absolutely loved this movie the first time I watched it. This week when I watched it, I came down a little bit on it, and I think it was maybe the movie felt a little 2010.
What do you mean by that?
I just the whole aesthetic of the movie. Now, granted, like, we're getting a lot of, like, you know, he's using a handheld camera that was, you know, period appropriate, and, you know,
that was 2003. This happened in 2003.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. It felt, I don't know how to describe it. It felt dated to me in a weird way, and I got over it after watching the movie for a few minutes. But at the beginning of the movie, I was like, it felt almost like out of time. It was, you know.
Sure.
But, you know, so like I said, I came down a little bit on it. I still think it's a 9 out of 10 for me, which is, you know, pretty freaking good. So.
Well, you know, for your Danny Boyle-isms, Hugo, you mentioned some of the fantasy sequences. Some of those worked for me and some of those didn't. I kind of mentioned earlier, I don't really like the the party thing. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm okay on it. But his talk show interview where he like interviews himself as a talk show host, I love that.
I go back and forth
like
on that scene.
One of my favorite parts of
fantastic.
the movie. Honestly, it's my favorite parts of the movie. I think James Franco's great in it. I think the editing is great in it. I think that the cinematography is great in those scenes too. And that is also like that's a good character moment that really does explain, you know, him realizing that he did this to himself to an extent.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good. What do you got, Hugo?
Yeah, for me, the sequence that really stuck out was when they do that super high-speed camera that goes from his position through the canyon all the way back to his car, and then it focuses in on the Gatorade, and and then it
worked
instantly
really well,
cuts
yeah.
back to him, and his lips are all, you know...
Yeah.
That's one of those
breaking because
that's
he
one of
hasn't
those
been
Danny
drinking
Boyleism
water.
things.
Oh, I thought that scene was fantastic at making you feel the way he feels.
I think another Danny Boyleism, I guess, you could arguably talk about the triumphant music in the ending, because basically Steve Jobs ends in literally the exact same fashion with the triumphant music kicking in, nearly the same music to be honest, and like Steve Jobs takes the stage, and it works for me a lot better here than it did in Steve Jobs. I like Steve Jobs a lot, but like the ending's not my favorite part, and like the ending might be my favorite part in 127 Hours. So that Danny Boyleism does not bother me. I think it works really well.
Is the plot too simple to be impactful as the other Best Picture nominees?
I would say yes if this wasn't a real life story. The
I
fact
can
that
agree
it's
with
a
that.
real, the fact that this happened and this is a real person that did this makes this story an incredible achievement of just human resilience.
I agree. Yeah.
And I Josh had a note in here, and I completely agree with it, that this is like the one little detriment is that they do a decent job of filling time, as Josh said in our notes, but some of it feels like exactly that, filling time.
Yes.
And I completely agree with that sentiment, Josh. I'm so glad you wrote that down, because there is some, especially in the dream sequences, that I think, okay, I think I've already gotten the point. We might be, waiting on this a little too long. But yeah, overall, I get past it. I absolutely love that stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
We talked about already how real it is. The camcorder that they use in the movie is actually Aaron Ralston's actual camcorder from the event. When I saw that blew my mind. I was like, you kept it?
Yeah. So let's talk about. I think our last thing to talk about is the amputation scene itself.
Yes.
Right.
Which and we're just talking. Well, this is a good time to talk about how graphic it is. This movie in general. The focus on the urine going through the tube. I
like that, man.
I mean, it's good for the movie, but God, I was like, oh.
It does its job. It because he's about to drink his pee. It's gonna be gross for him, so you feel how gross it is. Like I can
make it gross for
smell
you.
that pee as it's coming at the camera. Really good filmmaking, I think.
I agree. And then the X-ray of the when he first stabs his knife into his arm, and it hits bone, and then he said, like James Franco says, bone.
Well, by that point, his arm's numb. So, like by that point, he probably didn't even feel that. I mean, he knew he hit bone because his knife stopped.
Yeah,
not because it hurt him. So that's kind of telling. But that part happens. That part happens like maybe an hour in.
Right.
And,
there's so much left.
He doesn't really start doing it until about an hour 14. Does he really start? So that's like one of two fake outs. He first mentions the word tourniquet at the midpoint, 45 minutes in, and like first starts like trying to cut at his arm, but he barely like breaks the skin. So that's the first. When you're watching this, you know probably that he's going to eventually cut his arm off as an audience member. At least I did. So like you're waiting for that moment to begin. Personally, when I saw this in theaters, I was terrified the entire time waiting for that moment to begin. But there are two fake outs. The first one is the midpoint where he first does the tourniquet and can't break the flesh. The second time is about an hour in when he hits bone, as Chris just said, and it's not until the third time, with about 15 minutes left, does he really make an effort at this.
Oh,
and
man, it is graphic. Like we were talking about the nerve. This is the moment. Like I was able to watch everything else happen without looking away.
Yes.
Until the nerve.
Yes. So
and it's the sound effect in that scene.
Yes.
That does it. Ugh.
It's the score plays this like dissonant, buzzy, like zzz,
like
kinda,
you hit the side in a game of Operation.
In Operation, that's exactly right. So and it does it 3 times when he tries to cut his own nerve, and that God, like
every time I'm like,
now.
oh. I flinch, I look away.
Which again, great filmmaking, I think, is that they can use a sound effect to like make it graphic. Like the visuals are very graphic, but I could watch those okay, but the sound effect is what really got to me. So that's like, again, very effective filmmaking. Also, the editing here is really good. Very quick cuts, different angles, like the blood on his mouth as he like holds the knife in the bloody knife in his mouth to like make adjustments and that kind of stuff. Really, really great 3.5-4 minute sequence, and worth the price of admission. And like the thing that I was dreading the entire runtime, ultimately I think like wasn't actually that bad, but definitely I think the legacy of this movie is this little 4 minute sequence.
Even just thinking about it, because the knife is so dull that he doesn't actually cut the nerve; he pulls it out.
Just pulls it. Yeah.
Tough beat for our guy.
The nerve is the worst part, but also the moment that he realized, I can't cut through bone, I'm just gonna have to break it off.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, that scene, the sound effect there, that moment was,
And shout out to James Franco, because he plays this all really well, I think.
But
James Franco does a fantastic job in those sequences, because it's, acting that is something that I don't think it is easy, because it's an experience that, I don't know, how do you even imagine with the kind of pain and the kind of...
Right.
I mean, I've broken a bone before, and that's already the most pain that I ever want to imagine ever again.
Exactly.
I've not broken a bone.
But, so that's 127 hours.
Let's rank it.
Let's rank it real quick here. So I'll just give the top 10 of our Film to Remember rankings. I'm going to take off the spoiler warning. Is
this going to crack the top 10, you think?
I think it might.
Okay.
Number 10 is Rudy. Number 9 is Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Number 8 is It's a Wonderful Life. Number 7, Incendie. 6, The Wind Rises. 5, The Departed. 4, Your Name. 3, The Thing. 2, Boogie Nights. And number 1, Citizen Kane. So, do we think it cracks the top 10 here?
I would put it squarely at number 9. So above Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, below It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah,
that's exactly where I have it as well. What do you think, Josh?
I mean, this list gets more meaningless by the week, as I've said every time. But I think my two biggest problems with it are Ma Rainey's too high and Jackie Brown's too low. And I think if we if we just flipped those, I would have a lot easier time with this list, to be perfectly honest. Because every time we watch a new movie, I think to myself, okay, I think I like that more than Ma Rainey, so let's put it right above Ma Rainey, which is my instinct here, like you guys just did. Yeah. But I also kind of don't think it's better than Mank or Jackie Brown, and that's kind of the whole problem with this list. I criticize you for doing this, I criticize you for doing this all the time, and I'm pulling a Hugo right now. So, I don't know. I'm mostly with you guys. I think it's better. It's just a step above Ma Rainey, but it's also, I think, not as good as Mank or Jackie Brown. So do with that.
So I think it's appropriate to say that, that to let people know that what your personal thoughts are.
At any point, should we reorder these 20? We're gonna have 20 movies now.
When we get to 20 movies, let's. This
is number 20. This is number 20. Right
this
here.
Is 20.
Is it really? Oh my God! This is number 20. So that's something to consider. We could consider about doing a re-ranking.
Honestly, just a very simple fix is to switch Ma Rainey and Jackie Brown. I think that would fix a lot of problems, personally. But I'm only 1/3 of the host here.
So in any case, for today, do you want to put it right above Ma Rainey's?
Let's do it. Yeah,
okay,
I love this movie.
At number 9 now, we have 127 hours, and I'm so happy that you guys enjoyed this, especially Hugo. I wasn't sure. I didn't know how to expect you would react to this movie. So I'm really, really glad you enjoed it.
Shout out to Rudy. Shout out to Rudy for being knocked out of the top 10.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Rudy.
Finally.
That's why Hugo's got a big smile on his face. He'll do anything to get Rudy out of the top 10.
Shout out to anyone on YouTube watching this. Shout out to my Notre Dame Nalgene, which is almost exactly the water bottle that Aaron Ralston drinks out of in the movie, and it has a ND on it because Notre Dame's the best. And
shills.
Go Rudy. Go Aaron Ralston.
Okay, so that's it for this episode. So Hugo, what are we gonna watch next week?
So next week we are going to give our predictions for the Oscars. I'll be hosting because actually most of the movies haven't come out here in Italy, so I won't have as much to say. I'll just go by Oscar buzz or whatever. So yeah, I'll ask you guys the question. But a movie that is available in Italy and that we haven't already talked about is Sound of Metal. So that will be the film to remember for next week. The main topic will be Oscar predictions.
I'm looking forward to it. I know I've mentioned it on the show a few times, but Josh is pretty good at the Oscars predictions, and every year he and I, for years now, Josh will post as each prediction comes up. He'll post on Facebook, "I got this right," and then I'll comment, "I got it right too."
Honestly, the only thing I use Facebook for anymore is like live tweeting the Oscars, basically, except on Facebook, and otherwise, I'm not on Facebook at all.
Yeah, so it's going to be a great episode. Really excited about that. So until next time, thank you for joining us. Have a great day.